Good afternoon, Mr. Murch.
How are you?
Totally thrilled of having this chance of speaking with you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for accepting my
Sure.
invitation. So, the first one would be, what value do you consider sonification to have as a tool for understanding or experiencing scientific data, particularly that related to astronomical phenomena?
Yeah, Yeah, I think it plays a role. Whenever you have any data coming at you on one bandwidth, so to speak,
Hmm.
if you can duplicate the pattern in another sensory bandwidth, that allows you to triangulate, in a sense, your understanding of what's going on because it's multimodal. And that's exactly what we do in film when we add interesting sounds to a soundtrack, to a film, is to deepen the experience that you're looking at. Um, and so it's pretty equivalent, I think. I don't know that I would put a huge significance on it, but it is significant.
I have a friend who says the sound and acoustics is useful or might deepen our understanding of the universe because it's like you can
Yeah,
like graphic
yeah. I
complex
mean, it's
concept.
important. It's important to remember that we have never known consciousness without sound. That when the fetus is developing in the womb is a very sonically rich environment. And about halfway through human pregnancy, the ears of the fetus begin to hear, and we know that the fetus is now responding to certain sounds because of, we can do sonograms and watch the fetus, and we can play a certain sound and and watch the fetus uh, react to the sound, either of the mother's voice. So sound is of all the senses, sound is the most intimate, bound to our consciousness because, as I said at the beginning, we have never we have never experienced consciousness without sound unless people are unfortunately deaf. So it's a very our relationship with sound is very deep.
Yeah, of course. Well, even being deaf, you can still sense sound through your body
Yeah.
would you agree then to say that the sense of hearing offers a very dense experience or a much more dense in the literal way than other senses?
Yeah, yes, you could amplify what I just said about the sound in the womb, to say that I mean it's interesting when you compare our sensitivity to electromagnetic spectrum.
Hmm.
Our eyes are sensitive to only one octave of light, so that the wavelength of red light is only one octave different than blue light. Uh, Whereas in sound, we experience 10 octaves when our hearing is perfect.
Yeah.
Um, so there is, relative to the bandwidth of that medium, we are receiving more information in sound than we receive when we see. On the other hand, one third of the brain is dedicated to processing vision, and only 1/30th of the brain is engaged in processing sound. So those two things compensate for each other. We only see one octave, but we do a tremendous amount of data processing on on that octave of vision, the electromagnetic vision spectrum, whereas sound gives us this 10 octave spread, and correspondingly, we only use 1/10 of our brain compared to the amount of neurons uh, used to decode vision.
Okay, it's almost the same amount of octaves that span across the
Yeah,
proportions that you get from the solar system when you translate Titius-Bode uh,
exactly.
to music notes, right? So, moving on to that specific subject, I wanted to ask you, since you began researching about Titius-Bode, what significant changes have you observed in its scientific acceptance or available data or in interpretation?
I would say none. It's
Okay.
code is a no-go area if you have a scientific uh, education. It's just it is not well received for all kinds of different reasons.
Yeah, well, but in recent years, Dr. Lane Weaver and his team,
Yep,
and
yep,
there has been some papers published uh, about exoplanets being found more easily through the modified
right.
versions of Titius-Bode. Um, but basically, it's still no-go place.
Yeah. That doesn't mean
Oh,
it's
yeah,
not true in some way that we have not yet grasped.
yeah.
But at the moment, I mean, it's like Wegener's theory of continental drift, in a sense. He proposed it around the turn of the last century and died before it was ever accepted because people, I remember when I was seventh grade, so I was maybe 13. I went to our science teacher and said, look, the um, South America and Africa fit together. And he looked at me and said, well, Walter, that's how it seems, but no, that's just an illusion. And that was the accepted point of view in the 1950s because nobody could figure out yet what the mechanism was for this ability of continents to drift. And it was only in the mid 1960s that by looking at the magnetic spectrum of subsea rocks, we could see alternating magnetic fingerprints. And that ultimately led to the conclusion, yes, there is an upwelling of magma that is pushing the crust apart in the case of the Atlantic Ocean. And it was easy to then take that idea and see that it applied everywhere on Earth. So I mean, that's the problem with Bode, is that it, there is no, according to science, the way we understand it now, there is no mechanism for this regularity. It also is marked down because one of the earliest intuitions about the organization of the solar system was that there was music of the spheres, that there was a musical relationship there, and the idea of that coming back from Pythagorean ideas coming back is just not the way the zeitgeist is wrong at the moment for that kind of thinking.
Yeah, of course. Well, it seems to be partially how science moves on, right?
Yeah,
I
one
it,
at a time.
yeah.
Niels Bohr, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking of Democritus and the atom when he
Yeah,
proposed that people might have think he was totally crazy, but
right.
then we know what happened.
Just to stick with this idea, the I mean, a famous counterexample of that is utility, in the sense that when Newton proposed universal gravitation, he said famously, non fingo hypothesi, I will not hypothesize about why this is. I'm just describing what it is. And so here, but people immediately, relatively speaking, within a few decades, it was universally accepted. Why? Because it was useful. You could use Newton's laws to kill other people with, because you could you could calculate the projection of a cannon more accurately. And so utility will overcome any objection in terms of causality. The problem with Bode is that nobody has yet figured out the utility of Bode. If somehow people could make a lot of money out of linking um, regularity in the spacing of the planets and moons of the solar system, then it would be accepted, and we wouldn't worry about the fact that there was no uh, understanding of the cause of it.
In your experience as a sound designer in the film industry, in your vast experience, um, how do you think the translation of visual or numerical information into sound affect our perception and understanding of such data, considering the cultural impact over time? Yeah,
Yeah, I would it's basically the answer I'd give is the answer to your first question. Um, that it's multimodal, and we made some attempts back in the 1950s to experience trimodal cinema,
hmm,
the vision, sound, and smell-o-vision, or so you could smell the roses when you were looking at a garden. For practical reasons, that really didn't take off, but I don't think I could amplify any more that question than my answer to the first.
sure. Thank you so much. In fact, this is fun. The other day I was just having a conversation with someone, and I told them I heard about these smell synthesizers as a project like a long time ago, and
Yeah,
he told me, no, 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 that never existed.
yeah,
You're lying.
yeah.
To what extent do you think our perception of seemingly universal patterns like Bode's or Benford's law or Zipf's law might be shaped by our neurology rather than reflecting objective reality?
Uh, yeah, in some, yes. Um, it is an effect. There's uh, the Umwelt idea,
Hmm.
from biology, that every organism lives within a sensory bubble constrained by the senses and the neurology that underlie them. Um, and so the perception of an insect, the world as perceived by a tick, is a very different world than the world perceived by you or me. In fact, your world is slightly different than my world. Um, Even down to if our eyes are slightly closer to each other, then the world that we perceive does not have the depth that it would if our eyes are further apart. So, yeah, I think that's there. I'm trying to remember the word, apophenia
Okay.
uh, is a word that describes that tendency that we see shapes in clouds, so there is obviously there's a whole region of our brain that is dedicated to processing the human face. The facial, I forget the exact
I
name
think it's
for it.
pareidolia. When you
The what?
see pareidolia is in Spanish. I don't know the
Yeah,
English
yeah,
word, but
yes, right.
um, when you see faces on cars or yeah, or
Yeah.
any kind
In
of
fact,
object.
that's the my interest in Bode is still very much alive, although it's been a long time since I went down that path.
Uh-huh.
But my current uh, interest in the book that I'm publishing next is the analysis of the human face geometrically, that it is organized around the concept, the golden ratio, so that the main markers of the face, the hairline, the eyebrows, the pupils, the nostrils, the lips, and the chin, are all in a golden ratio relationship to each other. Uh, why is this? Is this part of what we experience as human beings? Well, yes, except in a more limited sense, this also applies to other primates. They don't have the same hairline, but
Hmm.
the eye sockets, the bottom of the nasal cavity, and the lips, the meeting of the teeth, that's a constant way back to some of the earliest primates. So it's just, in my case, that's just the way my mind works about certain things, and I'm applying the same kind of analysis to the mysteries of the human face that I was applying to the organization of the planets and the moons.
Hmm. I just wanted to know how has your astronomical curiosity influenced your audiovisual work or vice versa?
Hmm. I hmm. I think it's just the tendency uh, to be sensitive to patterns that exist, that are either there in fact, um, or that are there because of the way the human brain thinks. But the advantage that we have there is that we are making films which are appreciated by human beings. So we may be completely wrong, but we all see certain things, just that pareidolia that you were just talking about. We tend to see faces uh, in rock formations, just because it's the fusiform facial area. That's the part that has the patterns of the human face are
Right.
locked in to that part of our brain. So it's just pattern recognition, I think, and maybe my tendency is slightly stronger in some of these areas than maybe other people, but I don't know. That may be it. Yeah, one thing just to keep in mind about Bode is that for various reasons historically, when we were considering things like the diameter of the Earth,
Hmm.
uh, and this goes back to Eratosthenes and other scientists back in the Alexandrian days, the margin of the Earth that was significant was rock based. In other words, they didn't consider the atmosphere of the Earth.
Yeah.
That, because in those days, the idea was maybe the what we consider air is throughout the entire universe. In
Hmm.
other words, if you went vertically up from the surface of the Earth 10,000 miles, you would still be able to breathe. We just didn't know. It was only a later discovery, following on Copernicus and Newton and everyone. Oh, wait a minute, there is a limit to the atmosphere. So we are prejudiced still by thinking in terms of solidity. Uh, you look at any book, what's the diameter of the Earth? It's calculated not to the edge of the atmosphere, but to the edge of the surface of the Earth. So what Bode says is let's extend that further and say that there is a point at a certain distance from the center of any primary object, whether it's a planet or a moon, just sticking with planets for the moment,
Hmm.
uh, that there is a distance out from the center of the planet, and any object that finds itself inward of that distance will ultimately become part of the planet. In other words, there's a curve, so to speak, of attraction that gets very steep at a certain distance from the center of the Earth. And um, beyond that, the planets are relatively safe. They will continue to orbit forever
Hmm.
uh, because they're further out than the brink of this uh, attraction.
Yeah.
And so you can get planets or moons or objects orbiting inward of that, but over their entire lifetime, eventually they will be pulled in and they will crash into the surface of the sun or the planet or the moon or whatever object.
Hmm.
Outward of that, what Bode says is that in ways we don't fully understand, there is a corrugation to the density of space-time or something. And there are these waves that have a period uh, that is a sinusoidal period that doubles with every iteration.
Hmm.
And moons or whatever the planets fall into the valley of these densities. Other things affect them. They are affected by orbital resonances of nearby objects that will pull them towards each other or away from each other, but that there is this other factor uh, which we may someday identify. I just call it variable density of the space-time medium, whether that's caused by dark matter or who knows what,
Who
we
knows?
just don't know. But that's the core idea of my interpretation of Bode's law. It um,
And, and and
if
you make this analogy with stationary waves.
yeah, exactly. And if you measure the 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 relative distances of the planets from that limit point, that horizon, then everything is simply an octave of the previous one.
Yeah.
So,
Which you call beta, right?
yeah,
The Roche
the
limit.
beta, exactly, the beta point or the Bode point. Uh, the reason it is musical is that we are measuring from the center of the sun, and that distorts, in a musical sense, the relationship of those orbits. So, in the case of the inner planets, you get C, B flat, E, C, B flat, out to the out to Ceres in the middle of the asteroid belt.
Hmm.
So that's, that's it. My advice to future scientists is look for what could be causing that medium, that variation in the density of the medium, which can be very subtle. It can be very subtle and have an effect over many millions, hundreds of millions, billions of years. So it does not have to be obvious uh, to the way we look at these things at the moment.
Who knows? Maybe we found out what's causing it.
Exactly. Okay, good. I will send you a little film I made about the golden ratio, um, which gets it's a 15-minute film with
Great.
many examples.
Amazing.
All
Please,
right.
I'll be happy to watch it. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Have a nice rest
you
of your
bet.
day.
Thank you. You too.